Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Wicked Bee of the West YouTube channel. My name is Dr. Stephanie Diana Eubank. I teach business administration over at Stan State, specifically operational management, supply chain management, and lean operations. So, as we continue our series on the various types of issues with regards to isolation in the workplace, whether you're in person, remote, or hybrid, having multiple modalities in the workplace does come with potential obstacles, which are opportunities to really learn how to become better leaders and again how the workforce can work on better protecting themselves from these kind of issues. Specifically today, we're going to talk about the strategies to enhance remote work with regards to collaboration. Now, structural or organizational isolation, this occurs when systems, workflows, and processes of an organization are built primarily, again, for in-person teams, and they haven't developed any methodology for translation into remote or hybrid workers, especially when we think about hybrid workers in sales who or those in training as far as training throughout the organization, meaning that these are people who are traveling all over the country or the world in different time zones, balancing in between in-person work and working remotely and working on the go. In this concept, a lot of the workflows and communication just aren't designed for these people, and this hinders the overall productivity and the ability for organizations to thrive. This also hinders your specialists who are in these kind of work modalities and those who are remote subject matter experts, the ability to really communicate and collaborate with their team members. And again, it's often felt that remote workers are facing barriers such as unclear procedures, siloed communication channels, limited access to decision makers, and tech and cultural norms that privilege on site presence. However, again, this is an opportunity both for leadership to learn how to lead more effectively in a remote, hybrid, and in person modality of their teams, but also how those in the workforce can better learn how to protect themselves and make sure how they can advocate for themselves and deal with online networking. Now, networking in a remote paradigm has never been more important than it is right now. In my a career, especially working within the financial sector, I have worked both in person and remote and had to learn how to network with team members that are on the other side of the country and scattered throughout the country. So developing these contacts, even in a remote sphere where I had never met some of them. Even 20 years later, I still contact with these people. I still have great networking with them, and we've never actually met in person. Or we've met in person maybe once or twice, but still keep in contact. And a big part of that is finding ways that you can do better with your networking, both in your organization and outside of it. So, again, how can workers reduce organizational isolation? Again, proactively document and clarify workflows and procedures that feel too vague. Don't be afraid to ask the questions and make sure that you're collaborating with your leaders to point out that you're trying to help through continuous improvement of the shared documentation and workflows so that way you're developing better process and procedures and more effectiveness as your teams grow and change. Using shared collaboration tools such as project trackers and other knowledge-based systems are a great way to maintain visibility across teams. Scheduling regular check-ins and cross-functional partners to replace in-person hallway conversations is another good way. But I also recommend with that, especially for leaders who are doing that, to don't just contact your employees because you're trying to just do a regular check-in. That almost feels like a parent coming in versus a collaborative partner. Also, this can make it harder for you to connect with your team to develop that camaraderie. I recommend also creating a Teams or Zoom, whichever you guys utilize for interpersonal communications and text messaging within your team to just have the, hey, like today being St. Patrick's Day, hey, anybody doing anything fun? uh, Checking in just on those kind of mundane aspects so that your employees have the ability to show their human side, not just their business side, is a great way to, again, help encourage collaboration, encourage overall networking within your team through not just your shared business goals, but your shared interests. It's a great way also to build organizational loyalty within leadership to, again, help your employees feel human, especially in a remote workplace where the only interaction they may have oftentimes is faceless. Request access to meetings, recordings, decision logs, or documentation to stay aligned with organizational changes is another good way that workers can help reduce organizational isolation. Also, join or create employee-led community or affiliation groups to help build informal communication channels. I also recommend finding online networks using LinkedIn or uh, Facebook, Instagram, etc., to where you can develop and coordinate with other specialists within your field so that you develop those outside networks and allow for that additional business networking so that way you're able to make even more cross affiliation collaborations. And my advice, contrarily to leaders, a lot of my advice for leaders in both remote, hybrid, and in person with regards to organizational isolation is similar. Again, looking and developing more transparency within your design of workflows and process and procedures. And again, make sure that you're sharing your documentation both to create cross-team visibility and to make sure that you're checking on the overall usability of all of these products. Ensuring decision-making processes are accessible, documented, and communicated consistently. There cannot be constant overlapping or changing of what the thoughts are, which is, again, another great way of having meetings on these topics remotely and recording, or at least utilizing transcripts so that you can double check in case anything is changed so you can update your process and procedures and other training materials. Also, organizations training managers in remote leadership communication practices. The research identifies there are essential skill sets in communication within leadership that needs to be enhanced for those who are leading in remote and hybrid modalities. The traditional ways of communicating, and not just the ways you're communicating, but the specific information and how you're delivering it changes with modality. A comment can come off with a totally different tone in writing in an email than it sounded in your head. So again, companies training leaders on how to lead and how to communicate. I personally find utilizing Copilot to soften my tone within an email, especially when it is, again, hard discussions that need to be had. You should not be afraid of the conflict, but making sure that you're discussing the conflict in a tactful and mindful way is always encouraged, regardless of your modality. I personally find Copilot is a great tool for me to help translate, especially because being neurodivergent, I don't necessarily communicate the same way as neurotypical people do, and there can be things lost in translation. So again, Copilot is great for basically helping to translate me into a neurotypical accessibility, while still, again, keeping my authentic leadership and my points consistent. Which again comes to my next point for leadership regarding reducing organizational isolation. Develop intentional relationship building rituals as your monthly team meetings, your way that you recognize your teammates for good jobs, and also focus on the positive of your team. I see too many leaders who are focusing on negative, like they're trying to have that gotcha moment with their teams, trying to catch them doing something wrong. And unfortunately, in leadership, just like in farming, you reap what you sow. If all you're focusing on is that negative, that's all you're going to be harvesting from your team. You want to make sure that you are pushing that positive, you are pushing that procedure, you are pushing that productivity in a positive and mindful way, and making sure that you are giving appropriate recognition to your teams regularly and consistently. Doing this helps you again focus on what you want to get out of your team instead of focusing on what you don't want to get out of your team, which again can lead to hostile work environment and just create an overall toxic AF workplace and toxic leadership skills. And remember, a lot of skills in leadership become habitual. If you don't work on making sure that you're consistently having a learning mindset and learning how to grow and change, you're going to keep pushing an unauthentic version of yourself in your leadership that will not help your teams. That's all I have for you for today. And remember, remote work, it's here to stay. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Thanks.